Okay. The last time we learned, we did we started the malacha of Kotev, which was writing on Shabbat, and we saw the issue of writing on Shabbat. Well, the Doraita issue was at least putting two letters and putting it with permanent ink. Rashi Rambam does permanent mean over Shabbat or lasting longer than Shabbat. We saw that machloket. We saw that electronic displays, there was a machloket whether that is a doraita or not. And then the last machloket we saw was different languages. Okay? So although the Mishnah said b'chol lashon, we had Rishonim who wanted to say that meant Hebrew or Greek, right? Square Hebrew or Greek. And those were the letters that were problems. And the other languages are maybe just a derabanan. And so the Yalkut Yosef had a big chiddush that if there were shuls already who hired goyim to write down the pledges on Shabbat, right? So, right, shvut to shvut, they're writing it's Amir Lanochri, and they're writing in not the Oraita letters, I mean not Greek or square Hebrew letters, and therefore you can leave them be just out of sight. You shouldn't start this minhag, but if you had it, you had it. And so we saw that for cases to buy things from Goyim and stuff like that, you can write as well. The guy can write in a regular. The guy can write in his regular language, not in Hebrew or Greek, and that would be okay. So that was a little bit just a summary of Kotev. Today we start the flip malacha, and the flip malacha is being mohek, which is erasing. Okay, we did start a little bit about erasing, but let's get back into it on page 232. Okay, so the basics of mohek on page 238, 232. Tani Rabbanon, Kasavois Achas Gedoyla, V'yesh B'mkoima Lichsoy Shtayim, Potter. If a person writes one letter and he has space to write two letters, Potter Avaloster. He didn't do the Doraita, he didn't write two letters, he only wrote one letter, even though it's a very large letter. But Machak Ois Gedoyla, if he erased one huge letter, the Yesh B'mkoima and they have in there the place to write two chayav. He did the Isser Doraita. Why? Because the whole Isser of erasing is erasing in order to make space to write. And since he erased and made space for two letters, he's going to be chayav. Amar Rabbi Menachem B'Rabbi Yossi v'zeh homer b'mohek b'chotev. And this is what we see is more stringent by erasing than by writing. So erasing one large letter that has now space for two regular letters, hayav, whereas writing one large letter is potter of a loser. Okay? And Rashi explains, She'ein meleches mechika chashuva elal menas liksoy. V'harei yesh makom l'shtei oisyoy. So now he has place for two letters, and that is the malacha of moichik, erasing in order to have space for those for writing. The Rosh, interestingly, the Rosh wants to know what about if I erase a smudge? What? Smudge. There's an ink smudge. You know, it's not a letter. Not a letter. It's a space. It's a blotch of ink, and I erase it on Shabbat.
For the sake of writing.
So what's the story? So says the Rosh. He says, look in the bold. He writes over here that one is liable even for erasing an ink smudge. Why? Because now he's going to have space for letters, right? So the Isser is erasing, not necessarily erasing letters, according to the Rosh, even erasing ink splotches in order to make space to write two letters.
That's correct.
Yeah, right.
That's so right, right?
Yeah, that's what he wants to say. So say
you do it just to erase and you don't want to write anything, that's Rabbanan?
That's going to be the Rabbanan, yeah. Okay, Shulchan Aruch, source 27. So someone who erases ink from parchment, or he wax from a notebook, right? Im yesh b'mkoimai, right? So it's ink from parchment, not necessarily letters, right? Ink from parchment and wax from a notebook. Im yesh b'mkoimai kedei lichtov shtei otiot chayav. So Shulchan Aruch goes with the Rosh. It's not necessarily erasing of letters. It's erasing something in order to make space for two letters. What about if I'm erasing not for two letters, but I'm erasing for a constructive purpose, not stam erasing. I'm not just going, no, I'm erasing in order to do something constructive. For example, let's say a person had a debt on record, all right? He owes X amount of money. On Shabbat, he already paid before Shabbat. And on Shabbat, he wants to erase that. He's not erasing it to write something else. He's erasing it to get rid of the debt. So is it when I say I'm erasing to write two letters, is it really the mindset to write two letters? Or is it for a constructive purpose? The erasing is for a constructive purpose. The most common constructive purpose is writing, right? But here I'm erasing not to write, but I'm erasing for a constructive purpose to get rid of the debt. That's the question. So the Pri Megadim, he wants to write.
Well, he's writing for constructive purpose. What's the constructive purpose?
He's erasing for the constructive purpose of getting rid of the debt.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
What size?
So regular letters, regular sized letters. It says two letters, regular sized letters. Right. So that would be a problem also. But when we mean space, we mean space for regular two size letters. Most people would write. So says the Pri Megadim, if someone owed someone else money and it was written and one wants to erase it, he is liable even if he did not intend to write two letters. Instead of Pri Megadim, erasing for another constructive purpose is also a problem. It's also wrong. It's also the Isser. But regarding erasing a smudge or the like, right?
What's a smudge?
Smudge, blotch of ink.
Oh, blotch. Oh.
We require the intention to write two letters in order to be Hayav Deoraita. Okay? So he makes a distinction over here, the Pri Megadim. The Pri Megadim says, if I'm erasing for a constructive purpose other than writing, okay, I'm erasing letters for a constructive purpose other than writing, that's still Hayav. That's also the Deoraita. But if I'm erasing a smudge, my intent has to be for it to write two letters. Because that's the only constructive purpose, I guess, he's looking at. All right. In the laws of Shabbat, Rabbi Nachshon puts this very nicely together, if I may say. Erasing that accomplishes a purpose, such as erasing a note. The one is owed money, or by erasing an extra letter in a Sefer Torah, is prohibited because of Mohek. Okay? So if you have an extra letter, all right, in the Sefer Torah, and a guy erases it, then this would also be the same Isser of erasing it. Even though one did not erase two letters, it may still be considered a Torah prohibition and not rabbinical. Okay? So erasing for a constructive purpose is considered the Oraita prohibition. Okay. Now we come to everyone's favorite, which is eating cake. Okay? So we are noheg that when we get a cake, we usually get a cake on Shabbat. That's the
What
real
page?
We're on page 234. So most Jews are knowing that when it comes to a birthday that's going to be in the week or was in the previous week, that the perfect time to celebrate it is on Shabbat. All right. And our pastime is to get a nice cake. And it says on the cake, happy birthday, insert the name. Okay. Now, can I cut the cake with the letters on them?
The letters are on the cake.
So the letters are on the cake, let's say. Yeah, let's say the letters are written straight onto the cake. Can I cut that cake? Well, interestingly, in the time of the Rishonim, a similar question was asked. So let's go into the Mordechai.
will tell you no. Right?
Let's look at the Mordechai. The Mordechai brings the Rabbeinu Meir, the Maharam of Rothenburg, was asked regarding the cakes of children on which letters and words are written. How can the children eat them on Yom Tov? Are they not doing mochek? By eating it, they're getting rid of the letters. Isn't this a biblical prohibition? Okay. So he said regarding mochek on Yom Tov is only a biblical prohibition when one erases with the intention to write. It's only if you do mochek almanach l'ksoiv in order to write something, right? They're not erasing the cake to write something. They're erasing the cake. So he says there's only Isser D'Rabbanan. Uvitinuk, we're not concerned. By a small child, we're not concerned. They're eating it, right? That's what the Mordechai says. The Mordechai says that it's a rabbinic prohibition, and because they're children, we don't have to stop them, but we shouldn't feed them either. So says the Mordechai, having a cake or cookie with letters on them, and the child eating it on Yom Tov is an issue d'Rabbanan. Don't stop the child, but don't give the child that either. Says the Ramah in source 30, Aser l'shaver uga shekosav aleya kimin otiyot. You're not allowed to cut or break cake that has written letters on it. Even if his only intention is to eat it, this is considered erasing. So the Ramah is clear. The Ramah says that if there's letters on the cake or on the cookie, you can't break it, you can't cut it, because you're going to be doing erasing. That's the Ramah. So we'll see the engraved, embossed into the thing. All right, we'll see that. Right now we're talking about Shekasav Aleya. So it's written on it, that letters. All right, now comes Rav Shlomo Lebet Halevi. And he says, as a first, he says that the Rokeach argues with the Maharam of Rothenburg. And in his humble opinion, it must be that those cakes and cookies were written with actual ink on them. Because otherwise, if it's written with food stuff, why is it a problem? Okay? And also, if the letters and words are formed and marked into the dough itself, right? If they're in the dough itself, the ein b'zeh mishemoichik, then it's not considered moichik at all if it's in the dough. And then he says that regarding the actual halacha, when the letters are written in ink on the cake, and he holds because of this eating the cake on Shabbat, I must consider this. He says because the Chachamim say that it's eating, and an activity similar to the malacha regarding eating, it should be okay. And one need not be concerned about mohek. So, he wants to say it's not the malacha of mohek. He's arguing and says the Rokeach would argue with the Maharam of Rothenburg. And he says it's considered malachot that are part of eating and it should be okay. So here's one opinion. Now the Guman Bava says more reasons why it should be okay to cut a cake with letters on them. Number one, cutting the cake, the mekalkelhu. Cutting the cake is a destructive form. Okay? As the actual movement letters serves no inherent purpose. It's not like I'm erasing almanach to write something again. I'm erasing and it's done for. I'm eating it. It's gone. Or I'm cutting it apart. It's not going to be there anymore. Then he says, V'gam kil acher yad. It's also not the proper way of erasing. You don't erase by cutting, okay? And by putting it in the mouth, eating it away, that's not considered erasing. And then he says, V'gam is the Rabbanon. Because the Shein Almanach L'Ktov. Shita. They know miskaven. It's not, and he's not miskaven to this. Mutter v'afilu psik reisha. So since it was psik reisha, it's going to happen inevitably. But I don't care about it. It's not, doesn't matter to me, right? And it's this is the Rabbanon. It's mutter. Says the Egman Rabbanon. But the Chain Nirel and Yodati Heter Gomar Bedavar Zeh. says that cutting letters on cake or on a cookie, not a problem. You see it straight up. That's what he says. Yeah, one of the game. It's one of the Achronim, the Dagum Rabba. And okay, that's what he says. He says it even further. You want to be machmer and not cut, be machmer for yourself, and don't tell other people you can't cut. So that's another opinion. Now, the Mishnah Berurah brings this distinction that we were talking about before, Rami, which is if it was written into the cake versus on the cake. Okay? So, says the Mishnah Berurah, right. Okay, either by print or by hand, then it's shari. The ain't sham ksiva aleya umemelo shaykh v'zemechi. All right. So what's the example? The example is the tea biscuits, right? So famously, everybody knows. Here's the tea biscuit, right? Okay, everyone sees the tea biscuit, and it has on it like an engraving into the cookie. Is that the Mishnah Berurah says that's never a problem? One. Why is it not a problem? Still letters. Why is it not a problem? It is part of the cookie. It is cookie. Okay? So he writes over here, the cake is always seen as adopting primarily a food shape, which is essentially also the shape of a letter design. Since impressing a letter or shaping the food is not kotev midoraita, it follows that destroying it is not truly muhek. Okay? So he wants to say it's an integral part of the food itself. So when it's, if you understand the difference, why Mishnah Berurah says no one argues when it's engraved into the food? It's because it is part of the food itself. Versus being the letters on top. Letters on top, that's the controversy. Letters engraved into it, not a problem.
Regular case where you have a cookie, you put like a stamp or something, not stamp, but to make like a mark.
That would be no problem, he says. That's not considered writing. In order to be writing, it has to be on top of it. That's what Mishnah Berurah wants to say. Otherwise, it's just considered part of the shape of the cake. That's what he brings down, yeah. And he says the same thing in the Ribiat Sefer. Okay? Cookies with designs embossed or impressed on them. It's only a problem if the separate substance, the letters are of a separate substance, then it's a problem. That's what he says over here. Okay, fine. Furthermore, he wants to say, the psik resha is still not okay, even if it's not by a Durabanan. He doesn't want you to do that, to cut it if it's written on top of it. And then he says this Sefer, the Gumar Revava, that seemed very lenient, only relying him if one does not cut the cake by hand in the place of the letters and only in one mouth while eating. So you cut around the cake, around the letters, and then you erase the letter in your mouth. That's the Mishnah Berurah allows you to do. So Mishnah Berurah doesn't want you cutting letters, actual letters on top of it. If it's impressed inside, not a problem. And if you cut around the letters and then you put it in your mouth and you erase it, also not a problem. He doesn't want you to actual cut the letters. The Hazon Ish rejects all of these leniencies. And he says, even if letters are formed from the cake itself, you're not allowed to cut it. So very good. How do you cut around the letters? Right. So he writes this over here. Cutting between connected letters of a written in script may be questionable if a significant part of the letter itself will be broken as a result. Even so, one is permitted to cut between connected words as long as the basic form and shape of each separate letter is individually recognizable. You got to take care to ensure that each individual letter remains complete and retains its legible identity. Therefore, one must be careful to cut only the connecting line between the letters so the letter itself will not be broken as a result. Okay, this is according to the Mishnah Berurah. You can cut between the letters. So if it's script, right, you have to cut at the connecting line, but not the actual letter itself. Right, stop from one letter to the next. Right, okay. Shmachat Kilchata goes on page 237, source 35. Shmachat Kilchata goes with the Mishnah Berurah. And he writes, even further, you can cut before Shabbat. You have all the letters there. Cut the cake before Shabbat, leaving the cake intact, but cut. Okay? And then on Shabbat, you move to the cake. It's not the letters. The letters were already cut. They just happen to be next to each other. Okay? And then you're taking them apart. That's what he writes over here. If one cut the baked item before Shabbat, removing a piece on Shabbat is permitted, even if by doing so a complete letter or picture is broken up. Okay. Chacham Ovadia in Hazon Ovadia writes as follows: if there are letters written on a cake using food coloring, so it's a substance on top, by the letter of the law, Mitzad Hadin Ef Shel Hakel L'Shvar B'Yad, you can break it by hand, or to cut it with a knife. You can do that. There's letters on a cake. You can cut it. You can break it. Not a problem. Well, but it's better to be machmir l'shvara b'feh derech achila. Okay, but it's better to break it in your mouth while eating. But if the letters are made from the actual dough, then it's no problem whatsoever. The letters are sunk into the cake or they protrude from it. Cut around the letters and then put the letters in your mouth. Lahalacha. This is what he brings down from the Chazon Ovadia. In the Yalkut Yosef itself, the Yitzhak Yosef and the Rizal Bitan over here brings down the halacha as follows. Okay. Okay. He writes over here. It's permissible to eat cake or chocolate on Shabbat, even if it has letters shaped in it. And one must break them in order to eat it. This is not an act of malacha mochek, since one does not erase here in order to write anything in its place. Although our sages forbade the act of erasing in any case, the person eating the cake has no intention of erasing. He wishes only to eat. Therefore, this case of sikresha, and it's permitted. This is the ruling of the poskim. This is permitted whether the letters are written on the cake with icing made of sugar and egg whites, or if they're molded into the cookie itself, and whether the letters protrude from the cakes, or if they're impressed in the cake. It is permitted to break the letters by hand to make bite-sized portion. This leniency has even a stronger basis if their letters are of some system other than square Hebrew letters, right? Because square Hebrew letters is the actual issue in Greek, and every other one is only a derabanan. So says the Yalkut Yosef, you have a birthday cake with the letters on top of it. You can cut it on Shabbat, not a problem. Okay? So, and in some of the stores that they do now is they get the little chocolates, right?
Yeah.
On top of the cake. So you write the happy birthday there, and then you can remove the chocolate and cut the cake. For us, you can even crack that chocolate and separate it even if the letters are on it and give it out. Because for us, we paskin that this is not an issue of erasing. It's not an issue of erasing. You're being mechanical. You're destroying it. It's for eating purposes. And everything, it's a derabanan, sikresha, the ichwat and it'll be permitted for all those reasons. One would allow to be doing it, but does right. It's better to be machmer, but most people, again, I notice by Sfaradim, I haven't seen people be machmer by this. People go ahead and cut the cake with the birthday message on it, and they fully can do so. Same idea. Also? Same idea. You can cut them all. It's food. It's fine. One can cut it off. Okay. Fine. So that's everyone's favorite about cake. So we talked about. Now, yeah.
Moshe, and what about
Yes,
if they put
Moshe.
like if they put little chocolate chips around to make it a letter, or some kind of little fruits to make up letters together?
Yeah.
That's like they turn something. They turn certain age. They put like little fruits
so
around to
same,
make
same,
it a letter. It's the same concept here.
same concept. Nothing changes. You can
Thank you.
cut it. You can eat it. You can break it. No, not an issue. Okay. Very good. Now let's take a look. What about? I have different letters. I have an A and I have a B on this card or on this paper. And now I want to bring the A, B together, or the Aleph Bet together. Is that a problem on Shabbat? Or is not a problem on Shabbat? So here I have one letter here and I have one letter there. Can I put them together? Or if I have a half a letter here and a half a letter there, can I put them next to each other? Yeah, okay, so let's take a look. Let's take a look. Mishnah. Shabbat Yud Bet. Hey, we're on page 239. We saw this Mishnah already. The guy wrote one letter on the ground, one letter on the beam. If one wrote letters on two different walls, okay, on two parts of a writing, on one tablet here, one over there, potter of a losser. You're not allowed to write. He actually wrote, right? Not write one letter. It's potter of a losser because it's not the right of two letters. Fine. Then you have another Gemara. Interesting Gemara. Source 38. I have. What? How could that be? He says, I wrote one letter in Tiberia and I wrote one letter in Tzipori. I'm Hayav. For what? How?
Wait.
I didn't write two letters next to each other. I'm writing on Shabbat. Okay.
The same paper? Is it
Why? Kitivahi kiriva. It is really considered writing, and it's only lacking in proximity, meaning that it's considered a writing. They're just not next to each other. If they were next to each other, it'd be considered a writing, and therefore he's chayav. Question 1 second. Vatnan kotav al shnei kotlei habayit val shnei dafi pinkas ve'ein nagin zem zem potter. You said if I wrote at two different walls, or if I wrote in two different notebooks, right? And you said there, I'm potter. Why? If I write in one letter in one city and one letter in the other city, I'm chayav. If I write on two walls in the same house, I'm potter. How is that? So he says, by the walls and by these other things, in order to make them come next to each other, I have to crack the walls. I have to cut them up. I have to bring them next to each other. So there's no way for them to get next to each other. They're considered two separate letters, and therefore, potter of losser. You're not allowed to write one letter even, derabbanan, but it's not a deraita. But if I write one letter on one paper and I want one letter in another one in what was his example? And then it's two papers. Two papers can come together right away. They're just not next to each other, but they could come right away. It's not like I have to cut the wall and do these other things to bring them together. And therefore, it's going to be asur. Therefore, a person will be hayat for that. That's what the Gemara says. Okay. Based on this Gemara, the Ramah writes, what happens? Sometimes you get a book. Take a look at page 241. You have a sefer, and someone wrote on the side of the sefer, page 241. Can I open this book on Shabbat or not? So says the Ramah, opening such a book breaks up the letters and closes it, forming the letters again. It's nevertheless permitted to open and close the book, since this book is made to be opened and closed, It's not considered erasing and writing, and merely separating the parts of the letter and bringing them together is not considered significant. All right? These letters coming back together is not considered significant because they're anyway considered together already. As if, like you wrote in Tzipori, you wrote in Tiveria, you say, oh, you wrote two of them, in Chayav and Chatav, because they can be close together. So says the Ramah, these, even though you're separating them, they're still next to there. They become close together. It's not considered separated. It's not considered being written. They're always next to each other, and therefore it's not a problem at all. That's what the Ramah says in the Shalos Tshuva of the Ramah. In Siman Kuf Yutet. Take a look at page 240, source 39. If two letters are already written, one in Tzipori and one in Tiveria, and one brought them together, he has not done anything significant because they're already considered together. Similarly, if they were together and he separated them, he has not done anything. And this is not considered erasing. The same applies to our case, that although one opens and closes, there's only achieved proximity and distance, and he's not done anything significant, as bringing together is not significant act at all, because even though he wrote here and there, it's considered he's chayav, because bringing it together is not an important thing, as long as it can be put together. It says the same issue is here, opening and closing this book, it's always considered together, and it's not considered breaking it up, erasing it, and putting it back. One can open and close such a book, but not everyone agrees with the Ramah. The Magen Avraham, he writes that the Levush writes, the one who does so, he says you have to be machmer, and you cannot open such a book on Shabbat. It's really erasing and it's really writing on Shabbat, says the Magen Avraham. And he says the Ramah's proofs are not conclusive. But he writes that the Knesset HaGedolah is katav shenohagin lahater v'kach katav Harash Levi. And so says Harash Levi that it's also permissible. So there is a machloket here. Some say you can't open it, it's not a problem. Some say you can't open it. Now, we talked about this is bringing two letters next to each other. But says the Mamre Mordechai, maybe this is a different case. In Tzipori on Tiveria, you had two full letters. But here what's happening is, I don't even have one full letter. I'm making the letter together as I close the book again. It's a half a letter, right? And I split the book, it's a half a letter. Then I close it, I make a full letter again. So maybe in Tzipori and Tiveria, the case was I had a full letter here and a full letter there. But here it's not one full letter, it's making the letter. And so you want to say maybe that's a difference. So you take a look, and source 41. It's obvious to me that one should differentiate between bringing letters that are already written together and breaking a letter and then completing it again. As bringing letters together is not doing anything. But in this case, when one unites half a letter with the other half or breaks a complete letter, it's a more significant act. It's more of a malacha. So he wants to say it would be a problem. And page 242, therefore you should be careful. So again, we have now the Ma'amir Mordechai who says you shouldn't open such a sefer that has a printing on the side of the book, because it's a significant malacha of writing. The Mishnah Berurah in source 42, he writes, Yesh Oisrin to open it and use it on Shabbat. Some answer it. But he says the Ramah brings the tshuva lahakil b'zeh. V'chein dat harba achronim. Right? And he says many achronim also. And he says reason is because that's the usage. That's the way it's done. That's the way people do it. V'chein aminah. Only kol malkum, says the Mishnah Berurah, nochon lahachmer kishiyesh lo sefer achim. If you have a different book, you should use a different book. Okay?
It doesn't have what? It doesn't have
What?
letters?
Right, doesn't have letters on the side. So the Mishnah Berurah says you could open it. Right, like the Ramah and like the others who said it's not an issue. It's the regular derech tashmisha of this item, opening and closing it. I'm not making and forming the letter. Not significant an act of malacha, but others say it is, and therefore the Mishnah Berurah wants to be machmer and says if you have a different book, you should use that book. What about patterns, printed on the side of the pages. All right, like yeah, and the Yalkut Yosef over here. They have a nice pattern over here. So am I destroying the pattern and then putting it back on Shabbat? And that would be problematic. Well, if the Ramah said letters is not a problem, right? So a random pattern. Okay, very good. So random pattern. So says the Shmiat Shabbat Kilchata. Rabbi Mekalim, many are Mekel, to open and close a sefer which has letters or pictures written on the outside of the pages. But it's proper to be strict and not use a book like this if one has another book, like the Mishnah Berurah. It's certainly preferable not to write any letters or pictures on the outside of the passages of a book. So lechatchila, you don't want to put anything on the sides of the book. Not pictures, not words. But then he writes, V'shamati mahagaon Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zechi Tzadik Libracha, that when it comes to pictures of insignificant patterns, that's what we're talking about over here. See, there's no significant pattern here. It's the Tam. I saw in the article they have an actual video of how they do this to their books. I don't know if everyone does this, but they have like the little shmata. It has like some paint on it or something like that, and then they just go onto the pages and they kind of dab it on, and that's the way they get this on the side of it. Okay, so they put the book together and then they dab on this print. See that blueprint over there on the Mikros Gadol? Same idea. They get a little like a shmata with some sort of paint on it, like a mixture of paint, and then they put it on. So there's no significant pattern. It's not like the guy drew a bird on the side and he made letters and stuff like that. So there, no one's machmir.
What is it for? For beauty?
What?
It's for to make it look nice. What's the point of that?
Yeah,
What's the point?
It gives a little bit of a look.
The siddur that you had for a while, you see it starts to get dark and everything, but one that has all these patterns, you don't notice it gets dirty.
Did you hear that, Malkiel?
No. What did he say?
So Rami was saying that when they put the pattern on the sides, you don't notice the wear and tear of the pages as you use them, right? Because you notice the pattern instead, so you don't see it getting yellowish or blackish or brownish as you're using it, so you have the colors instead. So there is an idea to have it, but it's not significant enough to even be machmir about opening and closing such a random pattern. Okay. Mordechai has another eitzah. He says, you know what you should do when you're opening it? In the middle of the book, you've broken the letters right away. So what is his eitzah? Rather to open it page by page. And this way, it will not be recognizable that he's erasing. All right, so his issue is if I open it in the middle, I'm right away breaking the letter. But if I open it page by page and I slowly scroll through page by page, it's not as noticeable that I'm erasing the letter as if I break it open in the middle. So that's Rav Mordechai is eitzah. Now, what is the idea? What is the halacha? If I had a ripped page, okay? Sometimes you get a siddur, it's halfway ripped, one of the pages. Someone stuck it back in. On Shabbat, that half a page fell out. Can I put that half a page back? So now I'm connecting letters. Even if it's not permanent, it's still the Rabbanan. But is this mutar or not?
The other half.
Yeah, let's say it's ripped this way, say ripped that way. Can I connect two parts of a page together? And it has half a letters here, half a letters there. Can I do that?
You're not taping it.
No, I'm not taping it. Taping it would be tofer. It would be a problem with tofer, that's for sure. What about putting it together? I'm putting two parts of a page together. Can I do that on Shabbat? Says the Shal Shuvah Gris Moshe, source 45. Regarding a torn page in a book, lifting the page is not mohek, and replacing the page is not kotev. So it's not considered erasing if I separate one half of the page from the other half, and it's not considered writing if I put the other half back. Even according to the Levush, who has an issue with opening the side pages like this, he's saying it's closed, it's erasing, it's building again. it would be permitted, since the vast majority of cases, the partial letter on one part is recognizable, and replacing the second part does not repair anything. You see a mem, half a mem, you know it's a mem. See, it's not like you're actually writing anything, because the two sides are already recognizable, says the Igros Moshe. Even the Levush would agree to doing that. Let's read it outside of the Tzurba in the Yalkut Yosef. He writes as follows. This is what he says over here. If a sheet of paper was torn down the middle, splitting many letters in half, it is permissible on Shabbat to place the pieces next to one another so that the torn letters become legible. This is not an act of the malacha of kotev. It is absolutely forbidden, though, to tape the pieces of paper together, right? This would be considered tofer, sewing on Shabbat. You're not allowed to do that. But to put the ripped page back together, just putting it next to each other, that is not a problem. And that's not considered kotev, and separating is not considered mohek. Okay? Same din. Igros Moshe said the same thing. Same din. You're allowed to put the paper back next to each other. Yeah. Want to separate it. How are you comparing this? Between the letters, you're saying? Yeah, we said that. We already said that. Yeah, we said that. Okay, fine. Yeah, in between the letters, we're allowed to do that. Right. Like, even to Ashkenazi. What do I want to bring? Also, not a problem. Cut the cake for Shabbat and then separate it on Shabbat, not an issue. Even for Ashkenazi. What do you mean?
What's the difference if the icing is connected, or if it was connected and you broke it and you put it back together?
Because either you're destroying the letters on Shabbat, that's the mohek. But if I did it before Shabbat, it's like this paper. I'm putting the paper away and back to each other. They're not considered erasing and writing. It's already separated. Enough.
Why is that so funky?
That's what we're saying it is. It's writing is when you're actually writing two things together. Here, interestingly, he writes, one may form peticha in a shul, even though there are letters on both doors of the aron or on the parochet, and by opening and closing it, one is combining and separating the letters. So some places have a parochet that split in two, right? And some have and some have on the wood itself they have it written. And now I'm opening it, I'm separating the letters, right? I'm closing it, I'm putting the letters back. Not a problem. That is not a problem. That's not considered writing. It's not considered. It's already there. Everything. It's not like I'm writing something. I'm just putting it there back, put it next to it, and not putting it next to it. That's not a problem on Shabbat. So putting letters next to each other, not a problem on Shabbat. We're talking about the same idea. Same idea. Not a problem. Letters, it's not the zipper. If I have a zipper on a sweater and the letters come next to each other, that's the way they form the question. Not zipper. A zipper that brings letters close to each other on Shabbat, not a problem. Okay. So what about Scrabble? Can I play Scrabble on Shabbat? Okay. Scrabble. Okay, so let's take a look on page 244. Page 244. Actually, your Scrabble's on page 246. So let's get up to 246. He actually brings Scrabble and puzzles on Shabbat. That's a section here. So we'll see that in about 2 or 3 minutes. Let's see what we have on page 244. Okay, regarding tearing between two letters of one word. At first glance, one could bring a proof to prohibit this from the halacha of one who cuts between the letters of Hashem's name. You're not allowed to cut between the letters of Hashem's name. Have I heard from Agon Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, the one need not be concerned about this, as we find this type of action is only significant regarding erasing Hashem's name. But not in our case. One need not be concerned about separating letters, as each letter stand on its own. Just as one writes 2 letters on 2 pages, one is liable for the lack of proximity is not significant. Similarly, separating between letters is not significant, provided that they are not erased. So this goes back So like the cake or other things separating letters that are retaining the letter and just separating between them, that is not a problem on Shabbat. Okay, fine. What about tearing letters on packages? So I want to open up a bag of something, some sort of food, okay, and it has letters on it. Potato chips, a chocolate bar, and it has letters on it. Can I open it or can I not open it? So, in the Shas Tzurba of the Ramah, he writes, this book is not similar to the cake. Right? In the book, he said you're allowed to open and close. The cake says you're not allowed to cut. Is once one eats the cake and one has performed a significant act of erasing it, and it's impossible to put the letters back together. But if one were to separate them and put them back together, it is possible that it would be permitted. As bringing them together is not a significant act. Says the Turei Zahav, the Taz, similar idea. Putting it back together is not effective. It's impossible to attach it after it's broken. But here, by separating the letters, by opening the book, no significant destruction act is being permitted. Now, the bottom box, there may be a practical difference between the two explanations of the Ramah and the Taz, right? If it goes back exactly, not exactly. Now, but since the parts of the letters remain in existence, okay, the Ramah's thing was, I'm allowed to open the side of the book. Why? Because the letters remain there. When I cut the cake, the letters disappear. That's why he doesn't want you to cut the cake. But what about tearing a package? Do the letters remain there or not? What happens to the letters? According to the Ramah, it may be permitted to tear the packaging as the letters remain on the package. So take a look at Shemat Shabbat Kehilchata. Regarding baked items that have a label stuck on them, bearing the name of the bakery and the like, one should remove the label in its entirety immediately prior to eating and not cut it so as not to damage the letters printed on it. So he wants you to remove the whole label without damaging the letters. One who cuts a sausage on which the name of the factory and the like is written on the peel should be careful not to damage the letters. It's better to peel or cut it before Shabbat. Similarly, one who peels an egg should be careful not to damage the letters stamped on it. The same applies to fruit or vegetables that have stickers stuck on them, bearing the name of the producer or the price of the product. Shemat Shabbat Kehilchata wants to be strict here. And he says if a food package has letters, you got to be careful when opening it up and not touch those letters. Now, those who disagree with the Ramah regarding the cake, such as of Shlomo Levi, Dagum Mirabava, one certainly may also tear letters written on packaging. Rav Avadia Yosef rules in accordance with their opinion, and Chacham Yitzchak Yosef writes as follows: one who tears plastic bags that contains food items may tear them even on the place of the letters, and this is not considered muhek, as this is not the standard way to erase, and also one does not intend to erase. Not his intention to erase. He just wants to get to the food. Here in the Arat, Yalkut Joseph writes, when opening up plastic bags of food on Shabbat, it's permissible to tear the bags even where there is writing. This is not considered an act of malacha mohek, since this is not the normal manner in which one erases. Furthermore, the person tearing the bag has no intention of erasing. It's a pesik reisha, the la nichala, b'drabanan, and it is mutar. So, therefore, we're allowed to open up packages, no problem. That's why sometimes Ashkenazim will come to a Sephardi friend and say, open this package for me, right? Because they would have a problem trying to cut around the letters, but we have no such issue of cutting around the letters. But let me just see what it says in the laws of Shabbat really quick over here. He writes.
Why is it Rabbanon? Because it's English or?
It is. Say again. Yeah, it's English. Okay, fine. You want to say that?
In Israel, they have square letters. Right?
Is it that saying that is the writer? But no, it's also not, because it's not muhek amanat to do anything. There's no constructive purpose from the erasing, right? So therefore, it's still going to be the Rabbanan.
Why Ashkenazim machram? They don't hold secrecy.
Some don't. But the Rabbanan, some don't. Which Brewer said to refrain from that. In addition, they're saying that it is considered cutting letters, and it's a problem. Those who hold a problem with the cake, like the Ramah, would say this is also a problem, opening of packages. In the Rabbi Nachshon, right, it's permitted to tear open the packaging of food, even though one will then inevitably rip some of the letters. However, if possible, it's preferable to rip around the letters. So he wants you to try to rip around the letters if possible. But if you rip it, it's not a problem, even if you rip the letters. Okay. Now we're going on to your question, which is Scrabble and puzzles on Shabbat. So what's Scrabble? Scrabble is the game that you play with letters, and you put letters next to each other to form words. When you form words, you get points. Right. Each block has different points. Some is a triple point, some is that point. Each block is a different letter. Each one has a point on it. It's a lot. It's a very interesting game. Scrabble. It's a good game to play, especially with school-age kids, so they can pick up their vocabulary. You have the good student at home will take out a dictionary for you and make up words that you never knew existed. But this way they'll get more points. So can you play this on Shabbat or not? I'm putting letters together. From what we've seen, right? From what we've seen, it's not permanent. I'm just putting letters next to each other. I'm not actually writing anything, right? We've so far seen this is all seem to be okay. So let's see Shmirat Shabbat Kilchatav. It's permitted to play games in which letters or parts of letters or a picture are placed side by side so as to make up a whole word or picture. A puzzle. Letters. You're allowed to play such games on Shabbat that come together to form something, provided that one does not set the word or picture in a frame. Okay? And the various parts are not interlocked as in a puzzle. Because then you're going to be dealing with a Maisa that's going to last. Give me Mikayim. Right? Mikayim, Rashi Rambam, is it Shabbat or is it afterwards? But if it's going to be a malacha that's going to last, now you're dealing with another problem. It may not be writing, but it's a malacha that's lasting. So he doesn't want you to do that. So if it's going to be a lasting issue, interestingly, he brings here in the note the Hayeh Adam on source. During the week, one usually writes down the scores when he's playing the game. He should not play that game on Shabbat because he might come to write on Shabbat. Right? Sometimes when you play Boggle and Scrabble, you got to keep record, right? And you got to keep the scores. And so now you're used to on the weekday writing. So you shouldn't play this game on Shabbat because usually when you play this game, you write. And you might come to write on Shabbat if you want to keep score. So Hayeh Adam says to stay away from that. So Scrabble is definitely not an issue. Puzzles that don't interlock are definitely not an issue. Puzzles that interlock and they come close to each other, if they're going to last for a long time, especially some kids, they make puzzles and then later on they put tape on them on the back and then they hang them up and stuff like that. That seems to be also more problematic to do that on Shabbat. Let's see what he writes over here. Did I see anything here about playing this puzzle? Okay. He writes over here. It's permitted to make and take apart a puzzle on Shabbat. However, one should be careful not to spread out all the pieces. One should be careful to spread out all the pieces before putting it together, so to avoid issues with borer. You have borer. Sometimes when you do the puzzle, they want to remove certain pieces here, there, here, and there. I'm using these now. I'm using those later. That's going to become an issue of borer. Similarly, it'll be permitted to play with loose blocks or cards that have letters on them, even if one will spell out the word. When playing Scrabble, then you bring the same thing. If you're going to write down the score, right? That's the Hayeh Adam.
What about letters on the refrigerator, the magnetic letters? They get stuck.
So he does write that one should not stick magnetic letters or parts of pictures to a board designed for this, or on the door of a refrigerator. Okay, it's permanent-ish because sometimes you leave it there for a long time-ish. All right, and that's the that's somewhat of the issue. There's also those, even though there really is no malacha with magnets, there are those who want you also to stay away from magnets on Shabbat, as it could resemble mechazek malacha of some sort. The magnet tiles and stuff. Like, although we say it's permissible, especially for little kids, they can definitely use it. It's really no malacha when it comes to magnets, but it can look like a malacha, so therefore we want you to stay away from magnets. But even if they're using magnet tiles, what's the big issue when they're using magnet tiles or blocks or stuff like that? Is ohel, right? To making an ohel, right? Because all you need is one tefach by one tefach with the cover on top, and you've already made an ohel, and that's an issa d'oraita. So you don't want them to put in any roof over when they're making those type of things. Okay, we have a few more minutes. Let's quickly go into the Isurei Dirabanan when it comes to Kotev, when it comes to writing. Okay, says the Mishnah, you're not allowed to count guests from a written list, only from memory. So on Shabbat, you invited a bunch of people, and you have a menu of what you want to serve and stuff like that. Says the Mishnah, you're not allowed to have a list on Shabbat. You're not allowed to read from that list. You know this? You heard this one? A lot of people don't know this stuff. Right. You're not supposed to count from a list. Why? Because you're scared that I want to check off I did something, so I'm going to erase it, or I write something on it. It's going to be problematic. So therefore, no list on Shabbat. Some say the reason why you can't use the list is because you're not allowed to read regular business documents on Shabbat. So two reasons: either because I come to a write or erase when I have the list, or because you're not allowed to read business documents on Shabbat. Okay.
The business document.
So what's the business document? Shtare hediotot. So some say it's actual business. Some say it's even if it's a goodwill and stuff like that. Some say the whole issue of reading on Shabbat, other stuff, is a problem that you're not conducting yourself in a Shabbat manner, or rather in a weekday manner, and that's problematic as well. Right? You want to keep it for Shabbat and not do weekday things. And the Shulchan Aruch writes, source 57 on page 250, Shtarei hediotot, dahainu shtarei chovot v'cheshbonot, v'gar shel shalom, and questions of how you're doing. Also likrotam, you're not allowed to read them on Shabbat. Va'afilu, and even le'ayin behem b'loi kriya, just to glance at them without reading it. Also, that's what Shulchan Aruch says. Lists, other documents, business documents, shalom or other type of things, advertisements, you're not allowed to even glance at them on Shabbat. Says the Shulchan Aruch, source 58 delicacies, he wrote them down. It is forbidden to read it on Shabbat, even if it's very high up on the wall, because you might come to read other business documents.
There's a question on the chat.
Even to look at them without reading aloud is forbidden. I heard something on the chat, but let me finish what we have to do here. Two reasons. First, one might come to erase guests or delicacies. As someone might say, I didn't invite enough people, I want to get rid of this, I want to add that, so that's a problem. And one says, Shtarei hediotot. So we saw that already. Says Rav Simcha Bar Makari on page 252, there is no exceptions to the prohibition against reading material that one might be inclined to erase. Thus, a host or a hostess may never read a menu, invitation list, or seating plan on Shabbat. A host or a hostess who is the charge of the list is not allowed to read the list on Shabbat, if necessary. It is therefore forbidden for someone other than the host to read the invitation list or menu for a Shabbat meal. Okay, and this we're going to see only if it's needed. All right. Even if a child of the host or hostess may read the invitation, and if a husband who doesn't help around the house, he may also read for his wife, right? Because he's not actively involved in preparing for the thing. So if he's a normal husband who's helping, then he's also not allowed to read the list. But if he's not a normal husband who doesn't help, then he's allowed to read the list. I guess here he becomes helpful. Now he can read it. What? The one that helps. One normal that helps usually, so it'd be awesome for him to also read it. The Shmir Shabbat Kilchata, or Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, possible glancing at it is to remember the order is permitted. He wants to give you a little bit of a head or wiggle room to glance on it. Shulchan said no, but he seems to be saying that would be okay. Maybe in the Mokum Tzarech. And he writes in the next, on source 63, if she will not feel calm otherwise, she's very nervous. She wrote everything on the list. She has guests and her mother-in-law is coming, right? So she wants to make sure everything's perfect. And she wrote it on the list, and she's not going to be calm otherwise. So in this case, someone other than the host, who may not erase anything, should read it. And he brings that from Nisan karelet. So that's the halacha that you shouldn't read it. You're not allowed to have a menu for Shabbat. You're not allowed to read from a menu on Shabbat. Also, either because of erasing or because of reading other documents. And if in the case of necessity, you can glance on it maybe. And in the case of necessity, someone else other than the person who's in charge of the list is allowed to look at it. What about secular material in general? Secular material in general is a problem on Shabbat. Okay, is a problem of reading it on Shabbat. Shulchan Aruch says it clearly. You're not allowed to read the book of Emmanuel or war stories on Shabbat. So the Ramah says the same things. The Ramah says maybe if it's written in Lashon HaKadosh, then you're allowed to read it even if it's secular because you're learning something from it and it's diktuk and it's Hebrew letters. Others say it doesn't make a difference and it doesn't matter what language it is. If it's secular, you shouldn't be doing it on Shabbat. The Magen Avraham has a kula that many like to use. If I enjoy it on Shabbat, then perhaps it would be mutter. Okay, so science books and the other stuff like that have a bigger heter. The Shulchan Aruch already writes that. He writes you can learn only Torah, but then he writes studying science books. Some permit it, some permit it. So therefore, for reading science books, you do have some sort of permission to read it on Shabbat. And person who's in medical school or something like that, and he wants to learn on Shabbat medicine this way in order to be ready for his test. He shouldn't say I'm preparing for the test, but he could learn it as learning knowledge, and it's be okay. But a person definitely needs to learn science for what's it called for the Gemara or something that he's learning. That wouldn't be no problem at all on Shabbat. Comes to newspapers, newspapers are also a problem. Even if the Jewish newspapers, they have advertisements in there, they shouldn't look at them on Shabbat. Rav Rosner says that he heard from someone that perhaps advertisements is not an issue is because it's not really I'm looking at the prices and stuff like that, but rather I'm just being informed of more information, right? And that's the Tosfot brings down that if there's letters that have information or possibly have information, I could read them on Shabbat because maybe it's something that has to do with the war or something that I can save a life from and stuff like that. So maybe that would be permissible. So it comes to shady things. But when it comes to material on Shabbat, you should have proper material. Stay away from newspapers, even Jewish newspapers. Necessary to read something, it would be okay, especially if it's a pleasurable or it's science or knowledgeable, and maybe that would be okay. But otherwise, you have plenty to learn from. We have a 10 for minyan. Yes.
Amen.